I wrong for kicking my sister out of my apartment for dating her abusive boyfriend? Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sending me on Instagram. My sister and I were very close growing up. Not only were we sisters, but we were best friends. 5 years older than her. My parents and I made sure that she was always safe and that she was never bullied. She had a great childhood growing up. Both of my parents are supportive, and she was given a great education and a safe home to live in. She was 17 and I was 22. I moved out and moved in with my boyfriend. My parents were supportive. Around this time, she met her now abusive boyfriend. What I'm about to say is how she describes her relationship with him. He love bombed her, basically stalked her until she decided to go out with him. He forced her to quit her job and to leave school because she couldn't be hanging around other guys. And about 3 months into the relationship, he began to push her up against walls, pin her down whenever she tried to leave when they were fighting. Oh yeah, and he also ended up using all of her savings. We finally broke up with him and she came to live with me and my boyfriend. But it gets so much worse. Part 2 is up. You have to go watch. Am I wrong for kicking my sister out of my apartment for dating her abusive boyfriend? Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. This is when my parents and I finally convinced her to leave her abusive boyfriend. It also took my boyfriend to talk to her for 3 hours to explain to her that he would never treat me the way her boyfriend treats her. After going no contact with him, he did show up to my parents' house twice and to my apartment once. And each time we threatened to call the cops and he would leave right away. After a few days, my sister started getting more comfortable and opened up. And this is when she tells me and my boyfriend that not only had he pinned her down, he had slapped her and pulled her hair on several occasions. And we ended up getting her into therapy. But then one day she comes back to my apartment and simply tells me that he promised he would be a better boyfriend and that he wouldn't abuse her and that he would try to pay her back for all the money he took from her. Out of respect for myself, my parents, and my boyfriend, I ended up kicking her out of my apartment. Now the problem is my parents are really angry with me, and that's the part that gets to me. I don't know if what I did was right or wrong, but it was my gut instinct. What do you think? My crazy toxic boyfriend made me get a lie detector test to prove that I wasn't lying about everything he thought I was lying about. He had substance abuse problems, but the things he thought I was lying about was my identity. He also thought I was an sex worker and that I was probably an escort because the only thing that pretty girls can do, of course, is rely on men's money, giving their bodies like that. But at the time, I thought that I needed to help him through his struggles. So whenever he would question me about things, I would obviously deny, but this made him even angrier because he loved fighting. And like most abusers, they're always looking for an excuse to get into a fight with you. So one day he says, would you take a lie detector test to prove that you are who you really are and that you're not lying about all the things I think you're lying about? I thought I needed to do it since we were in love. The lie detector test happens to be in this man's apartment. The moment this man sees me, all he starts saying is how beautiful I am. And he keeps saying things like, wow, you have such a great body. If you were my girlfriend, I would be jealous too. This man did everything in his power to make me nervous. Once we're finally done, the first thing my boyfriend says to me was, had you met that guy before? And I was like, no. And then he said that I did a really good job at flirting with him the whole time. I broke up with him later that night. And then I found out that this guy was a total scammer and totally invented the results. Told my ex that I failed the test, but there was really never a test. So if you're in a relationship and you feel like your boyfriend's accusing you of doing things that obviously you're not doing, maybe it's time to get out. I ended up getting plastic surgery because my boyfriend is prettier and hotter than me. You can totally roast me in the comments, but hear me out. When he and I matched on Bumble, I was shocked that he would even want to talk to me. I knew right away that he was way out of my league and he was way prettier than me. Preparation to go on this date, I dieted for 3 weeks and I lost 7 pounds. I put 3 layers on of Skims compression Spanx. That's how desperate I was to look skinny. Colored my hair chocolate brown, got the butterfly haircut, got 1 mil of lip filler. And the day of the date, I actually got my makeup done, but it was such minimal makeup that he thought I wasn't wearing anything. At the end of those 3 weeks, I had completely transformed. And the first time he met me, he kept commenting how beautiful my skin was, how rosy my cheeks were, pretty and plump my lips were. I actually believed I had no makeup on. I realized everything I did worked. I knew from this moment on I had to keep up the act. Now, no way in hell was I ever gonna have a small waist. So I went to a plastic surgeon and I ended up getting 360 lipo. And I also got new boobulas, but they weren't huge. They were just a little bit bigger. How did I explain this? Told him I had appendicitis and that I had to get surgery. Have to go to part 2, it's up. I got liposuction because of my hot boyfriend. I knew I needed to keep up appearances, so I decided to just go ahead and get the plastic surgery. At this point, him and I had only gone on 3 dates. He kept telling me how much he liked me. So I got the 360 lipo, I got a boobie og, only 1 size up. Got cheek and under eye filler, I got a little bit more in my lips. Told him I had appendicitis and this is why I was getting surgery. He came to my apartment twice while I was recovering. 3 weeks later, I looked so much better. And around that time is when he asked me to be his girlfriend. I kept eating healthy and working out and I kept losing weight, but I knew that I needed to keep up the makeup look. He thought I wasn't wearing any makeup when we met. Whenever I stayed over at his place, I would wake up earlier and put a little bit of makeup on. It's been a year and he still doesn't know about any of it. I don't care. I'll continue to put makeup on and style my hair in the mornings before he wakes up. My body looks a million times better now that I actually have a waist. And I've been putting in the work and gained lots of muscle. All of my friends have congratulated me for my glow up. My life has gotten so much better. People treat me better. I even got the position I wanted at work. Now I have the hottest, most amazing boyfriend. This wouldn't have happened had I not put the work into myself. Would you have done the same, or is this totally cringe? My best friend only keeps me around because I'm fat. Disclaimer, this is not my story time with sending me on Instagram. I've always been the chunky, pudgy, overweight, chubby girl in the group. Now our friend group consisted of 4 girls in high school. Once we graduated college, 3 of us stuck together while the other one was kind of out. Then the other 2 girls in the group got boyfriends, and I was on my own. Eventually they stopped reaching out to me and it was like I didn't even exist. Now, let me be very clear about something. I have accepted that I'm the chunky girl of the group. I never get jealous. I do not envy them. They are all very attractive and skinny, but I just don't care about that. I'm happy that they love their bodies, but I feel okay in mine. But of course, I knew that I needed to get healthier, so I signed up to the gym. Around this time, one of my girlfriends broke up with her boyfriend and she started coming around again. And I accepted her friendship again, but I told her that it hurt my feelings that she completely ignored me when she got a boyfriend. She promised that she would never do it again, and we started going to the gym together. She's the one that always gets hits on. Guys compliment her. It's like I don't even exist. In fact, they ask me for her number when she doesn't want to give it to them. You see where this is going? Decided to get dressed up all cute and we went to a bar together. Babe, part 2 is up. You gotta go watch. My best friend only keeps me around because I'm fat and I make her look good. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. That's when she invited me to go to our favorite bar. As usual, she always invites me to go to her place to get ready. Nope, she can never come to mine. So I lugged all my clothes and makeup all the way to her place. And as we're getting ready, she starts suggesting that I change my outfit. I felt really cute in my outfit. It was a sleek black blazer with the matching bottoms, tight black tank top, and gold jewelry. But as soon as she saw my outfit, she said I looked way too formal. And then she spent the next 30 minutes trying to convince me to change and put on one of her tight-ass dresses. I asked her if she was in her right mind, considering her dress wouldn't even fit my right thigh. Then she said that I needed to calm down and that we should just go get drinks. And then she ended up copying my outfit. She wore a gray blazer with skinny jeans. When we get to the bar, I started having fun right away. I saw one of my besties from work. Her and I get along so well. This is when I noticed my bestie was really quiet. But as usual, she's only waiting for a guy to come hit on her. Finally, some random dude comes up to her and asks her if she wants a drink. She's like, "Oh my god, thank you so much." Then she looks at me and says, "It's always good to have you around, you know?" Part 3 is up. My bestie only keeps me around because I'm fat and I make her look good. Disclaimer, this is not my story time with sending me on Instagram. That's when she tells me that it's always good having me around, you know? And I did not know what she meant at the time. When the random guy shows up with her drink, and then she does the thing that she always does. She flirts with these guys, puts her hand on their shoulder, tends to laugh at their stupid nasty ass jokes, in the hopes of getting a second drink. Me, on the other hand, was dancing and having fun with my coworker. That's when the random guy says, "Hey you need to tell your best friend to give me her phone number." And I responded, "I mean, she will if she thinks you're hot." That's when my best friend whispers into this guy's ear, but loud enough for me to hear, "Oh, she's just upset because I'm the one that gets hit on and not her. You know, because she's a little bit chubby." It didn't even make me angry. I already knew she thought this, but it stung. Like the fatty I am, I invited my coworker to a nice dinner. I left my bestie at the bar without a car. I also sent her a text saying, "I heard what you said about me to the guy, and if that's what you really think about me, then this is not a friendship I need to be pursuing." The next morning, I had about 20 missed calls from her, and so I blocked her. If she really wanted to, she could have come to my house. Do you think I did the right thing? Self-care sister out. Story time about how I found out I was born from incest. Disclaimer, this is not my story time with sending me on Instagram. Growing up, I always wondered why we didn't have a family. I mean, I had both my parents, but we never visited my grandparents, cousins, parents until I turned 15. That's when I started getting curious and I started asking questions. Finally, I asked my parents about my grandparents. I remember meeting them when I was a kid. That's when my dad got really upset. He told me to stop asking questions because we didn't need family. I immediately went onto Facebook. It wasn't hard to find my aunt, my mom's sister. I messaged her and she told me something disturbing. She said my mom and dad were related. They were half brother and sister. Part 2 is up. Time about how I found out I was born out of incest. Disclaimer, is not my story time with me on Instagram. When my aunt told me the disturbing truth. My mom and dad were half brother and sister. According to my aunt, when they were in high school, they always spent time together. Everyone just thought they were best friends. But apparently my aunt walked in on them making out one day. When she told her parents, my grandparents, they obviously freaked out and tried to separate them. That's when they tried to send my dad to a military school. 1 week before they sent him, my mom and dad decided to run away together. They finally ran away and never spoke to their family again until I was born. My grandmother begged them to get rid of me. My parents kept me. Part 3 is up. Story time about how I found out I was born out of incest. Disclaimer, is not my story time, it's on Instagram. After I was born, my grandmother begged my mom to give me up for adoption. My parents were both 18 when they had me. Not only were they jobless, they were also half brother and sister. Since my parents had run away from home, my grandparents didn't want to help them financially. Luckily, my parents started their own business and they are successful today. Finding out that my parents are half brother and sister, I understand our family history and why we were never close to our family. Finally confronted my parents and they denied everything. I decided I'd do the same thing they did. I ran away for 3 nights, hid in my bestie's basement. Finally, my parents came over and told me the entire truth. My parents do love me, but they keep me away from my family. What should I do? Should I forgive them? Story time about how my gay best friend confessed that he is not gay and he's actually straight and he's actually in love with me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time with me on Instagram. Let's call him Ted. Ted and I met in 10th grade. Now let me be clear. I did not think he was gay. In fact, I knew that he was hooking up with other girls. He was attractive and one of the most popular guys in school. I knew for a fact that he was hooking up with the most popular girls in school. He befriended me. He told me that he was secretly gay, but I was the only person he had ever told. We became besties. Started telling me about the guys he liked, about guys he had hooked up with, and I started telling him all my dirty secrets too. We would sleep over at his house almost every other weekend. He would sleep over at my house almost every other weekend. But we were together every single day and every single weekend. His parents loved me. Dad would always say things like, I can't wait for you and Ted to get married. And I would just stay quiet thinking, oh my gosh, if you only knew, you have a gay son. For 3 years, his parents thought we were in a relationship, all because he wanted to cover the fact that he was gay. After graduating high school, we went to the same university and we decided to be roommates. In front of people, he acted like my boyfriend. He would kiss my neck and hold my hand. It gets so much worse. Go to part 2. Story time about how my gay best friend confessed that he is not gay and that he is actually in love with me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it's on Instagram. After deciding to become roommates and moving in together, he was still acting like he was my boyfriend in front of other people. Because according to him, our friends and his family would never accept that he was gay. Anytime we were in front of people, he would grab my hand, kiss my neck, and just act like a couple. Now, living together was fun. We would go to parties together and he would always take care of me. I was still changing in front of him, was still telling him all of my secrets. This man would wash my underwear. That's how comfortable I was with him. One night I told him I had a huge crush on this guy. That's when he told me that we should practice kissing so that I could kiss with my crush. I was a little bit tipsy, so I accepted. 10 minutes into my kissing lesson, he starts putting his hand on places he shouldn't. That's when he confessed that he's never been gay. He only told me that lie in high school to get close to me, that the lie grew so much that he couldn't retract. Then he tried to kiss me again, pushed him away and told him that what he had done was abuse. I felt completely violated. Kicked him out of the apartment, of course, and I told his parents and mine. My dad went to his house and punched him in the face. I'm even getting therapy for it now. Should I report him or something? Story time about how my boyfriend shames me for having cellulite. Disclaimer, is not my story time, send me on Instagram. I'm 24 years old and my boyfriend is 21. According to him, he has never been with any girl who's had cellulite before, or even an ounce of body fat. Yes, I know what you're thinking, he's a total asshole, which in that sense, he is. But the rest of the time, he's completely fine and actually sweet. We met last year at a friend's party. At the party, I instantly fell in love with him. I thought he was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen in my entire life. And it was reciprocated. I saw him from across the room and he made eye contact. A few minutes later, he walked over to me and just struck up a conversation. I know that people present themselves the way they want to be seen, especially when they're trying to impress someone they're attracted to. He started telling me about how he's studying to be a doctor, how he volunteers at animal shelters, and that every single weekend he also volunteers at the soup kitchen. Everything he said was absolutely perfect. By the end of the night, he had asked me out on a date and I said yes. I did explain to him that I didn't want anything serious and he said that was totally fine. I was trying to focus on my studies, so having a boyfriend was not in my plans. But after we went on 7 dates, he asked me to be his girlfriend. He wouldn't take no for an answer. After about a month, I finally said yes. Mind you, at this point, he hadn't seen me naked, not even in a bathing suit. The very night that I said yes to being his girlfriend, he asked me to come over to his place. He made a whole gourmet dinner, even bought super expensive wine. So we ended up doing it for the first time that night. The next morning when I woke up, the first thing he said to me was, "Do you ever exercise?" I was shocked. Part 2 is up. Story time about how my boyfriend shames me for having cellulite. Disclaimers are not my story time, I sent me on Instagram. That's when he said point blank, super serious, "Do you ever exercise?" I just stared at him. I had literally just woken up in his bed after the first time we ever did it. Then I thought he must be joking. So I started to laugh a little, and then he says, "No, seriously, do you ever exercise?" I said, "Sometimes." Then he told me, "You should really try to work out at least 5 times a week." I went home and finally texted him saying that I wasn't comfortable with the way he spoke to me. That's when he said that what he said to me was completely normal, and that I shouldn't be offended. This was all in text, by the way. That's when he sends me another text message saying, you wouldn't have as much cellulite as you do if you didn't eat so much fast food. And if you exercise 5 times a week like I told you. I didn't reply to him for the rest of the day. Later that day, he shows up to my apartment and says, I should feel comfortable enough to tell you what I think about you. He somehow ended up making me feel bad and I ended up apologizing. Obviously, after that, I became really self-conscious about my cellulite and my entire body. So anytime we were together, I would always stay under the covers. By the way, my boyfriend doesn't have a great body. He's super soft and pudgy. Last week, he told me that he had abs though. Part 3 is story time about how my boyfriend shames me for having cellulite. Disclaimer, it's not my story time, it's on Instagram. One day, he pulls up his shirt and says, "Look, I have abs." Which, no, he doesn't. He's super soft and has a thick layer of fat on it. I smirked and he said, "What?" And I said, "You don't have abs." Then he says, "Yes, I do. I'm in better shape than you." By the way, he said this in front of his friends, so I was super embarrassed and stayed quiet the entire day. He finally went to drop me off and I was so happy to be home. But he decided to come upstairs with me. Got straight into my PJs. And when I came out of my bedroom, he says, "Wow, your cellulite's getting worse by the day." day. That's when I finally broke. I turned around and started yelling at him. I told him he had no right to talk about my body the way that he did, and that all he does is objectify me. He started laughing and said, "Wow, those are big words." And that when we met, he thought that I was in better shape. My clothes obviously tricked him. I'm 5'4" and I weigh 130 pounds. I am by no means fat, but the way that he was bullying me was making me think that I was. That's when I told him that he was the fat one, and that he had a big huge beer belly. I also told him that his face was super round, but that didn't bother me. Oh yeah, and that his hairy back was gross. Then he said, "Wow, I can't believe you're attacking my physical appearance." Then he stormed out of my apartment, and as soon as he left, I felt happy. We haven't spoken in 4 days. I'm afraid that if he asks me to get back with him, I will. But I should just break up with him, right? What should I do? Story time about how my creepy uncle flirts with me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. Send me on Instagram. I come from a really big family. My mom has 5 sisters and 1 brother, and my dad has 4 brothers and sisters. All of them have their own kids, so I have a lot of cousins. And this means we have a lot of family get-togethers. Every single weekend, someone is hosting a party. We all get together and eat, and it's actually a really nice time. But there's always that one creepy uncle. In my case, it's my mom's brother. He's 46-year-old and has never married, but he's a bachelor. He's got money, so he basically has a bunch of sugar babies. Whenever my family tells him that he needs to get married, he says he'll never get married to anybody. He thinks women only exist for the pleasure of men. When I turned 16, I noticed that he would stare at me a lot. At first, it was just staring. Every now and again, he never did anything really creepy then, but just the staring was enough for me. I never told my mom about it then, not until I turned 18. This is when he started making comments like, "Wow, you're growing into your body," or "Wow, you got great hips." He would make comments about how I was growing up, like, "Ew." He even told my dad that he needed to keep me away from guys because I was growing up really quickly. And because of my curves, men would think that I was a woman. This is when I finally told my mom that he was making me super uncomfortable. She thought it was funny at first, so I avoided him at all costs. Part 2. Story time about how my creepy uncle flirts with me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It's me on Instagram. When I told my mom that he was making me super uncomfortable, she laughed it off. She thought it was funny. She said, "Oh, you know how he is." So from that point on, I basically avoided my uncle every time we were at a family event. When I turned 20, this is when things got even worse. He would ask me things like if I was a virgin, or if I had a boyfriend, if I had ever been on dates. And one time he even told me that he would get very jealous if I ended up bringing a guy to one of our family events. One time he complimented me on the dress that I was wearing, so after that, I only wore baggy clothes to family events. The fact that I had to change the way that I dress so that he could control himself makes me sick. I finally told my mom again that my uncle was always bothering me. It's when she told me that the world is filled with men like him, and that all I needed to do was just ignore him. So I told my dad everything. My dad took it a little more seriously and told my uncle that he needed to stop making comments. My uncle just laughed. Part 3 is up. Story time about how my boyfriend shames me for having cellulite. Disclaimer, is not my story time. Send me on Instagram. I'm 24 years old and my boyfriend is 21. According to him, he has never been with any girl who's had cellulite before, or even an ounce of body fat. Yes, I know what you're thinking. He's a total asshole, which in that sense he is. The rest of the time he's completely fine and actually sweet. We met last year at a friend's party. At the party, I instantly fell in love with him. I thought he was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen in my entire life, and it was reciprocated. I saw him from across the room and he made eye contact. A few minutes later, he walked over to me and just struck up a conversation. I know that people present themselves the way they want to be seen, especially when they're trying to impress someone they're attracted to. He started telling me about how he's studying to be a doctor, how he volunteers at animal shelters, and that every single weekend he also volunteers at the soup kitchen. Everything he said was absolutely perfect. By the end of the night, he had asked me out on a date and I said yes. I did explain to him that I didn't want anything serious and he said that was totally fine. I was trying to focus on my studies, so having a boyfriend was not in my plans. But after we went on 7 dates, he asked me to be his girlfriend. He wouldn't take no for an answer. After about a month, I finally said yes. Mind you, at this point, he hadn't seen me naked, not even in a bathing suit. The very night that I said yes to being his girlfriend, he asked me to come over to his place. He made a whole gourmet dinner. Story time about how I became an IG model / escort for billionaires. I'll tell you that last month I made $60,000. This clearly is not my story time and send me on Instagram. So at the beginning, I had to lie about my age. I'm really 36 years old, but I say I'm 22. I do look a lot younger than I am, and of course, I get filler and Botox. I started my Instagram account 6 years ago. My inspirations were Anna Cherie, Amanda Lee, Sam Jojo, and Abigail Ratchford. I mean, Abigail Ratchet. I basically copied all of these girls' pictures. Within a month of starting my Instagram account, I had 10,000 followers. And yes, all of them were males. But I didn't really start making money until 2018. You know, like every other girl on Instagram, I signed up for OF. And that's when I started making serious money. But I was also making money from Instagram. Brands would send me clothes and watches and protein powders, stuff like that. Eventually, I became an ambassador for one of the biggest Instagram clothing stores. I think we all know what I'm talking about. Fashion Hove Nova, and I started making a lot of money then. So I basically started living above my means. I got myself a new apartment in Beverly Hills, and it was $6,000 a month. I also got myself a Mercedes, and I would exclusively shop at Air One. I would also go shopping at Rodeo Drive almost every day because I wanted the paparazzi to get pictures of me. And I even called the paparazzi on me a few times, so I had to pay them like $2,000 out of pocket. So yeah, I was spending a lot of money. Whatever money I got that month, I would literally spend it by the end. One month I spent $25,000 going out with friends. I would usually pick up the bill. This is what started getting me into trouble. Part 2 is story time about how I became an IG model / escort for billionaires. After I spent the $25,000 in 1 month, I decided I needed another income source. So I thought of escorting. One of my very good friends in LA was also an escort, and she told me about it, but I was like, I can't do that. But one day I called her and she told me everything. She gets contacted through Instagram by very, very rich men, like billionaires. I honestly didn't believe her at first, but then she showed me receipts. Her bank account had more than $1 million in it. She told me that she had only been doing it for 6 months. She put me in contact with several people and they had to verify a bunch of my stuff. Then after a week, I was finally in. I was really scared. I had to go get my passport renewed. This meant that I was going to be traveling internationally with men that I didn't know. A few days later, I get a message on Instagram from an account. The guy that owned this account was clearly very rich. It wasn't him contacting me, it was his assistant. He got my information and 2 days later, I was on a private plane. I landed in a foreign country and I spent the entire weekend with this guy. He didn't speak English. Basically took me around his city and showed me off for his friends. I honestly didn't feel uncomfortable at any point and he didn't try anything. In fact, he was actually super shy, but his friends on the other hand were really handsy. Part 3 is up. Story time about how I became an Instagram model / escort for billionaires. That's when his friends started getting really handsy. We were in a really expensive high-rise and the apartment was literally worth millions. And I knew that all of these guys were used to getting whatever they wanted. One of the friends actually grabbed my arm and told me to sit on his lap, but I told him I couldn't. He wasn't the one that hired me to be there, so I had to go straight to the guy that hired me. I told him that his friends were making me uncomfortable and he said, okay, we should leave then. I was actually shocked that he listened to what I wanted. Now one of my regular clients and I travel with him almost every 2 months. So let me tell you how much he paid me. For the 3-day weekend, I ended up with $50,000. Yep, that's right. But let me tell you a little about the dark side of this. A few jobs later, I ended up with somebody who was completely crazy. I ended up going to Vegas with this guy. He was approximately 10 years younger than me and was filthy rich. But he was also a complete psycho. He bought me this whole outfit that he wanted me to wear the entire night. Told him I was more comfortable in my clothes. I was wearing a Fendi dress. It looked great. That's when he said, no, you're gonna wear this. I ended up walking around Vegas in a micro mini skirt and a bikini top. By the end of this night, he was getting really aggressive. I tried to stay quiet, hoping that he would just forget that I was in his car. Suddenly, he turned to look at me and wanted me to do something. When I said no, he grabbed me by the hair and told me that he owned me for the night. Then he said, I'll add an extra $20,000 in there for you. And it does get worse. But now I learned to save my money. I no longer pay for my friends' drinks and food. I still have my $6,000 apartment and I upgraded my car. I live like a princess. I also bought my parents a house though. It was definitely one of the happiest days of my life. And believe it or not, I actually did end up finding love. My boyfriend is okay with my job, but he just asked me to be safe. Of course, he asked me every day to quit because he wants to support me, but he can't give me the life I've given myself. What should I do?